Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker Show. This is your midweek roundup of all things maker and embedded and lovely. And this is show 101. This is the first show since our 100th episode, so we're playing catch up. Because there has been a few bits of news, there has been a few new things released, and we're going to try and cover a few of those in this episode. This is the sort of news and products episode. Next week will be a very project-based episode. And just to get it out the way at the very start of the show, if you saw the 100th episode and you took part in the huge giveaway we started last week, we will be letting that giveaway run for one more week so more people can enter it. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, go and watch our 100th episode. We started a rather large giveaway on that show, which you can still be a part of. You can leave a comment on that video or this video, it does not matter. Anyway, that's a long and rambling introduction. Let's get on with the show. This is the One Hacker Band on TikTok, and this is a one-man robotic band. Not the first one we featured on the channel, but certainly one of the more interesting ones, and they now have a vocalist. And what a fantastic choice of song as well to show it off. Now, if you are interested in knowing more, the One Hacker Band is one of many amazing makers who are making content for TikTok. I know that until I started making video content for TikTok for Electromaker, I'd sort of dismissed the platform as something that wasn't really for me, but there are a huge amount of people who are making fantastic projects and giving short-form video updates on them. I understand it's not the best the best experience to use TikTok in the browser, but it's one of those things that I realized that since it is since it's algorithm-based, like so many other social media sites, once I started just liking maker videos, it's pretty much the only thing TikTok ever shows me now, and personally my TikTok is quite a fun place. No horrible influences or mad teenager challenges on my feed. But the One Hacker channel specifically is fantastic, just lots of short videos showing really awesome stuff, and also the beautiful old school power glove right there. I really should dig mine out and do something with it. They are wonderful things. Now, moving on to the Raspberry Pi Pico W. So, on release, everyone was very happy that there was a RP2040 board from Raspberry Pi that had Wi-Fi, but there were a few people who said, not only does this board not have Bluetooth, it will never have Bluetooth because you've messed up the way it can have Bluetooth. And yes, there was a lot of people who got very angry about that. And Alistair Allen, who was the head of documentation for Raspberry Pi and a thoroughly lovely bloke, there's a full-length interview with him on this very YouTube channel if you would like to hear me chat to him for around an hour on a whole range of different stuff. Very politely said in the comments, we haven't made that mistake. We can make Bluetooth happen. We just wanted to get the board out and working with Wi-Fi. Bluetooth is something that is on our minds. We're going to make it work. And then he followed up at the start of this year by saying, everyone who's been asking about it, Bluetooth support, it got added to the milestones and for the upcoming 1.5.0 release of the C SDK, so expect it coming out later this month. And yes, it is now out. So it's a very long-winded way of me saying if you wanted to do Bluetooth on the Raspberry Pi Pico W before, you now can, but only with the C SDK. There's no MicroPython support as yet. However, everything that goes into the C SDK will eventually get ported to MicroPython or CircuitPython one way or the other. But yes, immediately what you're seeing here is the first thing that came to mind for me is that if you have Bluetooth support, does this mean I can start adding running-based accessories to my Raspberry Pi Pico W projects? What with me being a midlife crisis runner and all, and my chest heart rate monitor is one of the first things that I thought of, which is why I picked this Elector magazine article in order to share the news that Bluetooth is now out. But yes, that is it. I will link this article in the description if you want to read it, but realistically, you could also just go to the Pi C SDK GitHub page and get the latest version of it, which now has Bluetooth. We're going to take a very quick stop at the Jeff Geerling blog. Now, you're almost certainly familiar with Jeff Geerling. Jeff and his nemesis Red Shirt Jeff have a YouTube channel which is pretty much the Raspberry Pi YouTube channel at this stage. If there's anything to do with Raspberry Pis, he's pretty much covered it on his channel, and he has quite deservedly got a huge following in that regard. However, I'm not sure everyone is as up to date with the fact that his blog is fantastic. It has a fully written blog post for almost every video that he posts with a lot more information, and it is generally a good read. And in this particular case, he is covering the new Raspberry Pi debug probe. Rather than just cover the Raspberry Pi blog post saying that they'd released it, I thought this would be a better thing to draw your attention to. But in case you hadn't heard, Raspberry Pi just released a debug probe. It is very similar to a Sega J-Link type thing, and it is $12 from Raspberry Pi. It features an RP2040 chip in it, but it has a custom board inside it and a quite nice frosted plastic case as well. Anyway, long story short, this is a nice write-up on his first impressions of it. He did a little bit of playing with it, found it very easy to use, and spoiler alert, he says, yep, it's good, it can go with the rest of my debug probes, and that's kind of it. The first thing that I'm sure a lot of people will ask is, why would you bother getting an RP2040 based debug probe when you can just put the Pico debug firmware onto a normal Raspberry Pi Pico and use that as a debug probe? And that's a good question. You might not want to do that. I don't know enough about the Pico debug firmware and how it works to really have an opinion on that. Maybe that's something to look into in a future episode. But yes, if you are interested in finding out a little bit more about that, I will leave a link to Jeff's blog in the description. And even if you're already a fan of his YouTube videos, I generally find that I really enjoy reading his write-ups on things, and there's some information in there that he doesn't have time to put in the videos as well. And of course, me being someone with small children, sometimes I'm lying in bed reading stuff, I can't be watching stuff. Really nice to have a YouTuber that still puts full blog posts up for the videos that they make. Now, ChatGPT writing code is something that has been showing up all over the internet recently, and I thought this was a good chance to do a sort of double whammy, because this is a video about ChatGPT writing Arduino code from the YouTube channel Learn Electronics. Now, I've been following Learn Electronics for a number of years, and I have learned a lot of electronics from this YouTube channel. There's a variety of fantastic projects, some of which are microcontroller based, a lot of which aren't. And again, as someone who's somewhat interested in modular synthesis and learning the basics of electronics, it's a great channel for that. Also, I'm a big fan of channels where there are just start to finish, making something, soldering it, idle chit chat in between. It's exactly what I love to see. So, the hardware setup here is a set of LEDs that are designed to work as a Larson scanner. Larson being Glenn Larson, this was the special effects coordinator who worked on Battlestar Galactica, and I think the thing with Knight Rider, the thing with the car, with Kit. It's the LEDs that move backwards and forwards. It's a very distinctive effect from that particular era of television history. But the kicker here is that the code is supposed to be written by ChatGPT to turn this into a Larson scanner. And it is sort of an amazing video. It is paced wonderfully. It goes through exactly everything that ChatGPT spits out, sometimes in real time, and you hear the reaction to the code coming out as well. Spoiler alert, it can do it. I've messed around with ChatGPT a little bit writing Raspberry Pi Pico code, and it's wild. It can do PIO assembly code for me. It can take the bits that I don't understand and give me things that I can just plug into code and make them work straight away. I'd love to do a much longer bit about ChatGPT at some point. Again, though, that would be like an episode length talk about. Maybe that's something we do one of the rare Electromaker streams for, just seeing what we can get ChatGPT to program for us. But yes, I thought this was a good double whammy. If you're interested in how ChatGPT is affecting things like the embedded world, it can already write Arduino code, and also, yeah, it's a great excuse to revisit the Learn Electronics YouTube channel, one that I am quite a fan of, and I'm sure if it's the first time you've come across it and you look through the years of history, almost 10 years of videos at this stage, you will find a lot of stuff that you will like. I still get such a kick out of watching ChatGPT code specifically, because the way it comments everything and tells you what's going on as it goes, it's wild. And you can did you know that you can post code into ChatGPT and say, what does this code do? And it will explain it. It doesn't always get it right, but it will explain it very confidently. If you are enjoying the Electromaker Show, you can help us by making sure you are subscribed to the Electromaker YouTube channel. Also, clicking like on this video or any other video that you like allows YouTube to know that you like it as well, and it makes it far more likely that they will recommend it to other like-minded people. That's a lot of likes in one sentence. Finally, this little drop-down menu next to subscribed allows you to click all. Now, this is your notification preferences. If you are subscribed to a channel on YouTube, in the bar on the side here, you will have a subscriptions bar, and this is for your subscriptions. But if you want to get a notification just within the YouTube website when a new episode comes out of the Electromaker Show, you can click this, and if you look here, you will see that this is just things from Electromaker, because this particular channel that I use to make a point each week is only has these notifications on for Electromaker. But you get a nice list of when they go up, you will get a notification straight away, so you know there is a new Electromaker Show. These three things you can do are free, and they do actually help us out a lot, because this is what allows the channel to grow. Recently, we grew from around 10,000 subscribers to 13.3 thousand, which is wild. The idea of even 100 people watching, being subscribed to this channel, I find kind of crazy, and the fact that we've had 3.3 thousand in such a short amount of time since the 10,000 subscriber milestone is wild to me. However, if clicking things on YouTube is not your bag, there is a better way that you can support this show financially and directly. And that is by buying things at the Electromaker store. At this stage, I don't think I really need to go into a huge amount of detail as to what this means. It is an online store for maker and embedded hardware and peripherals. Everything from buying plastic for your 3D printer through to getting a new Arduino board or any of the products of the week that we've talked about recently as well. You can see we have the beautiful photos of those here. And anything from any of the companies you see scrolling along the top of our shop screen. The next time you're thinking to buy something for your project or a gift for someone else or maybe something for your work, consider checking the Electromaker shop first, because if we have it in stock and you get it from us, that is the most direct way that you can support our show financially. We do not have adverts on our YouTube videos either as YouTube pre-roll ads or during the videos. So yes, this really is the most direct financial way that you can support the show if you wish. We're going to very quickly have a funding website things now, which is a part of the show where we look at things on funding websites, and we could have come up with a more creative name for this section, and we did not. Now, the EPI32U4 is a development board featuring the ATmega32U4 chip, which, altogether now, is the one you find in the Arduino Leonardo and the Arduino Pro Micro. And there's a reason that these chips were so prevalent for so long, because they can act as USB devices. For a long while, these are the things that you'd find in a lot of custom keyboard builds. I feel like these days they've been sort of taken over by a bunch of different chips, because there's a lot of different chips that do that now. But for a while, these were the go-to ones because they were Arduino IDE compatible and easy for everyone to use. Now, this is a very small ATmega32U4 based development board. It doesn't make any claims to be the smallest one because, funnily enough, we featured that one on the show before, and it's indeed on the same website. This was ages ago this came out. I actually ended up buying one. I don't have it to hand right now. They are absurdly small, but yeah, they're not actually all that practical. It was a fun thing to own, and I imagine it would be a nice thing to fit inside something. This is going the other way, though. It is very small, but it is entirely practical. Now, in short, this is a USB Type-C development board, which is nice. The fact that USB Type-C is taking over is something I'm very much in favor of. I've talked about this on the show before. It has castellated edges as well, which allows you to drop it into any PCB design, drop it into pretty much anything quite nicely, quite easily. And also, it has much better power protection than most other boards. Now, it doesn't mean you can just zap this with 24 volts and it'll be fine. No, it still has to have the right input voltage, but it has much better surge protection. In fact, in their own words, they designed EPI32U4 to accommodate noisy environments, even without voltage regulators, thanks to a ferrite power filter, a fuse, ESD protection, and surge protection. And then they go on to talk about how it can act as a USB device. Now, if you'd like to know more about this, you can, of course, come to this page. There's no price for it as yet. But I want to kind of address one thing even now, is whenever I talk about things with ATmega32U4 chips in, or any well-known chips, I always get similar comments, which are, well, why don't you just go to AliExpress and get a Pro Micro or Leonardo clone, which will undoubtedly cost less than this board on release, because it just will. I mean, the clones you can get you can get a whole bag of them for €5 or whatever. They will absolutely be cheaper, but it's a question of form, it's a question of what you're using it for, and it's a question of who you would like to support as well. But this is, as it says, it's set up for noisy environments. It has a number of quality of life features, and I imagine for some people, especially working in industry, who are coming up with prototypes and coming up with trying to get things up and running quite quickly, will appreciate having those things already built in, rather than having to either drum up their own development board that takes care of things like surge protection, or try and work with a cheap development board that doesn't have it and trying to hack it into it with an external power circuit or whatever. There's a reason why boards like this cost a little bit more. It's because they've been made with a little bit more thought for what they might be used for, rather than mass produced in order to fill a gap for cloned open hardware stuff that is allowed to be done. But yeah, I could go on a rant, but I'm not going to. If you'd like to know more about this, there will be a link to it in the description. There's the comparison table you always get on Crowd Supply as well, as to various different ones, including the aforementioned Micro Arduino, and a few pin-out things as well. We'll probably come back to this one when it goes live, just to see how much it is going to sell for. But yeah, just a fun little board. I thought it was definitely worth a mention. We are going to start out this week's show by looking... Nope. We're going to close out this week's show. We are going to close out this week's show by looking at a couple of pieces of hardware and a couple of online events that you can attend. And we're going to start with this Adafruit ATtiny1616 Breakout with Seesaw, which we'll go into in a minute, which is a STEMMA QT/Qwiic board. Now, a couple of things about this immediately grabbed me. This isn't the first board like this that Adafruit have put out, I don't think. I think they put out another ATtiny board, but at the time the implications didn't quite grab me for what they were. See, I really like the STEMMA QT/Qwiic system, and the reason that it has that STEMMA QT/Qwiic is because different companies, different things. Qwiic is Sparkfun's solderless click connection thing. STEMMA QT is Adafruit's miniature version of it that makes all of those things compatible with each other. But I usually think of this as a way of attaching, say, a screen or a microphone or a speaker or LEDs. It's a way of very quickly integrating things in that way that Adafruit have made microcontroller work kind of plug and play. You don't necessarily need to be able to solder and to work everything into a system, into a circuit, sorry. You can get a few different Adafruit things that click together and prototype things very quickly. It's a wonderful idea, and they've done it perfectly. However, this takes things a little step further. I'm used to the idea of a STEMMA I2C screen that you could attach, but this is attaching a microcontroller as an I2C device to something else, which is kind of crazy. You could have your Raspberry Pi sitting on the table, and this now is an I2C co-processor. It's an MCU on a completely separate board that you can set to its own tasks with its own timing and communicate to it via I2C. I'm sure this isn't a new idea, and I mean, SPI is the way that co-processors are talked to almost across the board. If you have an MCU that does not have Wi-Fi, for example, it's almost certain that if you do get a little Wi-Fi IC and stick it on the board, it'll be talking to it using SPI or QSPI or something like that. But this is a really modular way of doing it, and for some reason in my head, it took me a second to go, oh, okay, that's what they're doing. And there's a number of awesome reasons why you might want to do that. So just let's get this one bit out of the way first. If you are interested in trying this, they're available from Adafruit now. You can get them for $4.95, which is very cheap for a nice little side development board right here. And before you write in the comments, you could get an ESP32 off AliExpress for that money. Yes, that's not the point. But the link to this will be in the description. They also have a general overview here of what Seesaw is, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Because Seesaw in and of itself is something that I find kind of interesting. Seesaw is custom firmware that Adafruit have put together to basically turn these boards into I2C Swiss Army knives? So, there's a number of boards already out that have this already. There's an ATtiny817 and 816, and the one we've just talked about, the 1616, which is an 8-bit microcontroller, which has, well, I mean, I'm not going to go through all of these right now. It is an 8-bit microcontroller in a similar vein to most other ATtiny microcontrollers. It's very powerful for what it does, but it's very unpowerful compared to other bigger 32-bit processors, which is to be expected. Now, Seesaw is firmware code that allows it to be used as an I2C to anything device. So any one of these boards could be 14 extra GPIO for your project. It could be ADCs, it could be PWM outputs, it could be a dedicated NeoPixel or any other addressable LED output that uses the same protocol. It has its own EEPROM, and it has an interrupt output, its own I2C address selection. Oh, wait, I thought that was saying it has its own I2C pins. I guess that means it doesn't. Anyway, all of this is not so important. The important part is how easy it is to use with this Seesaw library. So, in order to get an idea of what Seesaw code looks like, let's look at the NeoPixel example they have here on the page. And this is a good example, I feel, because NeoPixels, like many devices, require very precise timing guarantees in order to operate the way that you want them to. If you've messed with addressable LEDs in the past, especially if you're using a system with a running system on it, like Raspberry Pi, didn't explain that as well as I could. An operating system, which has all of its different levels of priority, it's very difficult to make timing guarantees, and that's where real-time operating systems sort of come in, which is weird because we're going to be talking about them later in this episode. Anyway, I did feel like, you know, a dedicated microcontroller with its onboard crystal that can make its own timing demands is, yeah, it's going to be useful for that. And this is exactly what they're using it for right here. Now, they've connected it to a Feather, but you could connect it to anything that has an I2C interface. And in fact, the example code here has, the example code here actually shows two different ways of doing it. So the example code here would be for something like a Raspberry Pi, because it talks about I2C. So you would connect this to the SCL and SDA of your Raspberry Pi, for example. There is also a version for STEMMA if you're using a board with STEMMA built in, which confusingly this image does have. So the image here doesn't quite go with the code. That doesn't particularly matter. The interesting part of it is is that when you run this on your board, so your Raspberry Pi board, it will send that code via I2C, to the 1616 on the ATtiny1616. Oh, lots of words, tripping over them, and it will run the NeoPixels on that board using its own timing, meaning that you can do fun lighting things as much as you want on that. You can run that MCU right as ragged as you want, run it as fast as you want, to do whatever you want, and still do cool stuff on your Raspberry Pi without having to worry about reaching the timing guarantees that a NeoPixel setup would require. Now, I'm sure there are those of you who will instantly come up with other ideas for what you can do with this. I'm sure that if you know what you're doing already, there's ways you can do this with DMA and stuff like that on, say, an RP2040 or an ESP32. But for the hobbyists here, for the people who aren't necessarily engineers, this seems like a really awesome way of being able to add some functionality to projects without worrying about CPU overhead and things like that. Anyway, if you would like to know more, I'll leave a link to the store page in the description of this video, and the link just down the bottom here is the seesaw documentation that we were just looking at as well, which is definitely worth a read. Now, up next, RT-Thread are running a webinar. If you're not familiar with RT-Thread, it is a real-time operating system targeting hardware, similar to FreeRTOS, similar to Zephyr, if you've heard of either of those real-time operating systems. The idea of a real-time operating system being that tasks are scheduled, and so you can make demands on the system that you can't on other forms of systems that are very timing critical. Now, if you, like me, think that sounds very nice, but you have no idea what the practical use of it would be, this webinar will probably be for you. They've teamed up with NXP and STMicroelectronics and WCH Electronics to give some real-world examples of how their RTOS, their real-time operating system, can work. And they're also holding a contest, which is in a similar vein to the Electromaker contests that we've run in the past. Now, by that, I mean that you will be provided with the hardware you need in order to realize this. So they'll be giving out actual development kits in order for you to use their operating system, their free real-time operating system, to make a project, and then entering that project into a contest. There's no more information about it right now, the idea being that they're going to launch it at the webinar, which is free on the 15th of March at 4 p.m. Central European Time. You can head to the link in the description of this video and click register in order to register for the webinar. So we're going to look at a new Arduino board now, sort of. It's actually an old Arduino board. It's the Arduino Nano 33BLE Sense, but they have put out a new revision of that board, and they haven't so much changed it, they've just updated it. Now, one of the things that hasn't changed is the price, which you'll probably be glad to hear. It still is $40.50 direct from Arduino, and the idea behind the board is functionally the same. If you're not familiar with it, this is a 3.3 volt compatible board, which has a bunch of sensors on it, hence the Sense name, and it is Bluetooth Low Energy, hence the BLE. So the sensors are an inertial measurement unit. The original board had a 9-axis accelerometer, gyroscopometer, magnetometer. I always get those things mixed up, but it had a 9-axis accelerometer on there, as well as a temperature and humidity sensor and a pressure sensor, a MEMS microphone, and a gesture sensor. And I believe all of that has changed apart from the color and gesture sensor. In fact, I can just stop waffling and go straight down to the important bit. What's the main difference between Rev 1 and Rev 2? The replacement of the 9-axis accelerometer for two IMUs, a 6-axis and a 3-axis IMU, BMI 270 and BMM 150. Now, the number designations I might not remember perfectly, but those little Bosch sensors are showing up in absolutely everything. And I can only assume that they have made a cheap and very, very good part. Either that, or they're the parts that are now available, because I'm almost certain that one of the reasons that this revision is happening is because of the lack of availability of parts that everyone has been suffering from. And they've also replaced the temperature and humidity sensor and the microphone. Other than that, everything else should work out just the same. There was a couple of just other small things. Yeah, they've replaced the power supply on it, and I know nothing about onboard power supplies, so I don't know the reason behind this or the difference. Components and changes have been done in order to improve the experience, so this is obviously seen as an improvement. An addition of a VUSB soldering jumper on the top side of the board as well. So if you're using I presume that means if you're using software USB, you can solder a jumper to make it always show up as a USB device, a software USB device, which will be obviously a lot slower than a real. That's like real. I think software USB is like 1.1 compliant, but I know very little about it. This is something from, the past that I'm vaguely remembering. So, there's a few little changes if you're already using this you'll need to make in your code, but this is more or less a drop-in replacement for the Arduino Nano 33BLE Sense, and these particular form factor Nano boards are fantastic. I really love them. I think I may have mentioned in last week's show that my favorite Arduino board of the last while is the Arduino Nano RP2040 variant, the RP2040 Connect, which has many of the same features of this. It has a bunch of sensors built in, but the difference with that one is the main processor was an RP2040, and it had a co-processor which allowed internet access, and this was long before the Pico W came out. But yeah, it's everything else you'd expect from Arduino as well. Fantastic documentation, a load of projects out there. If you're interested at all in Edge AI, this is the board for you, because the onboard NRF 53840 chip is already supported by Edge Impulse. There's a bunch of projects out there, a bunch of easy to follow tutorials out there. If you're looking to get into Edge AI, this might be the best bang for your buck board that you can get. I'm not affiliated or being asked to say this in any way. I'm just a big fan of these particular line of Arduino boards. It's one of the more exciting lines I think they've put out. Anyway, that's enough waffling from me. I'll leave a link to the shop in the description, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people writing and talking about this in the coming days as well, who will be giving it a much wider go over than I will, but all of the details you really need to know are on this page. Now, we are watching and listening to a piece of installation music art by an artist called Traversaz in France, whose name I may be pronouncing wrongly, of course. And it's made up of a circle of pieces of slate that were found on a French country estate and turned into standalone or grouped instruments. And the person who's standing there with their hands on the two platforms is completing the circuit by putting their hands on two copper electrodes, which is what makes it go. And it's a really interesting kind of interactive installation, because from what I can tell, at least from the write-up, it just detects whether the circuit has been made. So as you can see, these people are touching each other and setting off single tocks, as it were. If you think of each one of these as like a tick and a tock. But the actual patterns that were made, I think, are algorithmically generated but pre-programmed. And I'm not saying that from any knowledge of the project. I'm guessing here completely. And that's what I love about the artistic representation of maker art, is that people can say what they like, but they don't have to show they're working. It's not like a project where you're showing everyone how you did it exactly. You just get the art at the end of it and you have to guess how it was made, and I love that, I really do. And the reason I'm showing you this is because the Maker Music Festival 2023 is coming up, and they are open for submissions. So if you are a maker who likes to make sounds with your devices, if you're a musician who would like to try and make an instrument, the Maker Music Festival will be interested to hear from you. It is a purely virtual festival, and you perform at this festival via videos that you submit to them. They also have one of the craziest, most esoteric but wonderful sites I've come across as well. You have this huge building, and these sets of buildings, and this is the Parch building, and then if you move to the side, here's the Nancaro building, and these are all very notable names in experimental instrument building and music creation. Harry Parch especially is someone who I studied back in university. Amazing man, not the right show to talk about him though. And of course, Don Buckler. Yeah, if you want to talk about beautiful and amazing but also somewhat esoteric synthesizer designs, yeah, exactly. Now, if I go back to that very first page, the project we were just looking at is the top left window here, Pierre. If you'd like to know more about it, click there. The video will come up. You can also get a bio of the artist. You can get a link out to their website and a little bit of information about it. And there's that for every single project that was submitted to 2022 as well. I particularly like the musical boxing gloves. I mean, I really don't need to show you much more than that for you to get what that's about. So if you would like to know more about the Maker Music Festival, do head to the site. I will leave a link in the description. It's just a wonderful site to look around, and like I said, there's just such a huge amount, there's a huge wealth of incredible projects. If you are interested in 2023 and you would like to submit a project, if you click the Units Available flag up here, it will take you to a page where you can either log in if you already have an account, create an account if you don't, and get more information about the submissions, the submission process. So if you would like to submit to the Maker Music Festival 2023, make an account, and then it says here, the first thing you'll need to do is create your account, and once that's done, enter your information about yourself and your project. If it looks good, then they'll let you know to complete your project profile. So you don't even need to have everything finished right now. If you're working on a thing that intersects maker and musician, or just makes cool sounds in a makery way, it's worth putting in for the Maker Music Festival, because yeah, it really is an amazing thing. I really wish that I could spend an entire Electromaker show just going through the submissions of the Maker Music Festival, and to be honest, if that is something that you'd be interested in seeing, do let me know. I would be more than happy to do a special about Maker Music, because as anyone who's watched this show for a short amount of time will know, it's kind of my passion when it comes to this stuff. So I will leave it at that for now. I could talk for hours about this, but the Maker Music Festival 2023 is coming up, and I'm very, very excited. So that was our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for all the continued support that you are showing Electromaker. And yes, this was quite a news-heavy episode. Don't worry, we'll be getting back to the projects next week. In fact, we have a whole plethora of projects, both Electromaker and otherwise, to show you. And I thought I'd just ram them all into next week's show, as we missed a bit of news because of the 100th show last week. Anyway, we will get to that next week. But for now, I hope you have a fun, safe, and creative week, and I'll chat to you soon.